They said my porch swing was a violation, a threat to community aesthetics. At first I laughed, thought it was a mistake, but then came the certified letter. Threats of daily fines, even legal action. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a swing, it was personal. When I first moved into this neighborhood, all I wanted was peace, a quiet place to build memories, sip coffee on the porch, and live without drama. I played by the rules, every last one, painted my mailbox the approved shade of taupe, made sure my trash cans were hidden by exactly 3 feet of shrubbery. I never questioned the HOA until they questioned me. It started with a letter, cold, clinical, and signed by the HOA president herself, Karen. According to her, my porch swing was in violation of community aesthetic standards. That swing wasn't just furniture. It was a handmade gift from my late grandfather. The last thing he ever built. I appealed. I explained. I begged. But they didn't care. They wanted it gone. When I refused, the tone changed fast. The letters turned into fines. The threats became personal. And that's when I realized Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was picking a fight. And I never lose. It started with paper. Letters typed in that cold HOA font, slipping into my mailbox with mechanical precision. Notice of violation. Final warning. Immediate compliance required. Always signed at the bottom by Karen, the HOA president who'd turned passive aggression into an art form. The porch swing, according to them, had to go. It was non-conforming, a visual disruption, an affront to community standards. I ignored the first few. I thought surely they have better things to do than chase a man over a swing. But I underestimated how deep this went. Soon the letters escalated into fines. Small at first, $25, then $50. By the third week, they were threatening $100 per day. I kept the swing. It stayed. Not out of defiance, but out of principle. That swing held memories. My grandfather built it with his own hands, sat with me on it when I was a kid. It was the last piece of him I had left. That's when things got strange. One night around 2 a.m., I got a motion alert from my Ring camera. I checked the footage expecting maybe a raccoon or a late-night jogger. But no, it was a woman, hood up, phone in hand, walking slowly up to my porch. She leaned in, took several close-up pictures of the swing, then scurried off. I watched it 3 times, stunned. She never knocked, never spoke, just documented and disappeared. The next morning, another letter, this one with photos attached. Continued violation, daily fines now in effect. I knew who it was. Karen. And if there was any doubt left, she erased it later that week. She showed up on my doorstep unannounced, clipboard in hand, while I was eating dinner with my wife. No courtesy knock. Just rang the bell until I opened. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. Just launched straight into her speech, how I was out of compliance, how the board would pursue legal enforcement, how this isn't personal, it's about preserving the integrity of our neighborhood. I glanced at her car parked out front, still decked out in Christmas lights. It was March, and I'd seen her front lawn, bright pink flamingo stuck right in the center, with solar gnomes lining the walkway like weird little sentinels. Yet somehow my porch swing was the danger. That's when the floodgates opened. Suddenly I was getting hit with violations I didn't know existed. Excessive wind chime noise, non-compliant doormat, unapproved garden stone. I hadn't changed anything, but the notices kept coming. When I tried to appeal, my emails were ignored, then bounced, then blocked. I called the HOA office. Karen is unavailable, they said, every time. I started to realize this wasn't about a rule. This was about control. I wasn't just a target. I was the target. So I did what any rational person would do. I started collecting everything. Photos, letters, video footage. I cataloged every violation notice, compared timestamps, cross-referenced rules. And as I dug, I noticed something that didn't sit right. Several of Karen's friends on the street, homes with far more egregious violations, had no notices, no fines, nothing. One had a rusted-out truck on cinder blocks in their driveway. Another had neon blue LED strip lights blinking around their gutters, yet not a single warning in sight. Why? Because Karen wasn't enforcing the rules. She was enforcing her rules. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for recent HOA approvals, just in case. What I found blew the whole thing open. Karen had approved renovations to her own property without a vote from the board. Fences, roofing changes, even expanding her backyard deck. All rubber-stamped with her own signature, and not just her own. 3 other board members, her friends, had similar unapproved changes. The HOA wasn't just unfair, it was corrupt. I brought the documents to a lawyer, just to be safe. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. This could be a lawsuit, he said. You've got serious leverage here. But I wasn't ready to go nuclear. Not yet. Instead, I sent a friendly little tip to the local newspaper, then a neighborhood Facebook group, then a couple of journalists who covered housing disputes. It didn't take long. My porch swing? It wasn't just a swing anymore. It was the spark, and the fire was coming. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a petty feud over a porch swing. This was a pattern, an abuse of power hiding behind the respectable mask of neighborhood order. Buried in public records were dozens of quiet approvals, all signed off without a vote. Deck extensions, driveway widenings, outbuildings. Karen had greenlit every single one, for herself, for her friends, and all without the required community notice or board consensus. Meanwhile, the rest of us were getting fined for doormats and wind chimes. I knew I had something now, something bigger than a swing. So I made a few phone calls. First to a legal advisor who'd handled HOA abuse cases before. He was cautious at first, until I sent over the documentation. This isn't just unethical, he said. It might be outright illegal. Next, I contacted a local journalist, someone I knew had a history of exposing HOA overreach. She was intrigued. I handed her the entire package: photos, violation notices, emails, ring footage, and the goldmine of public records. And then quietly, I began knocking on doors. Turns out I wasn't alone. One neighbor had been fined over unapproved flower colors. Another got dinged for a political bumper sticker on a car parked in his own garage. And then there was the retired couple down the street who were threatened with legal action over decorative lighting they'd used during the holidays. All of us had one thing in common. We weren't part of Karen's inner circle. The community had been divided into 2 groups, those who followed her rules and those who suffered under them. It was time to close that gap. A week later, the regularly scheduled HOA meeting took place. Karen strolled in like she always did, perfectly coiffed, clipboard in hand, smug as ever. She barely glanced at anyone, assuming it was business as usual. But it wasn't. Half the neighborhood was there, and so were 2 reporters, cameras slung over their shoulders, press badges visible. Karen blinked when she saw them, hesitated for just a second, then composed herself, brushing it off like it was nothing. She opened the meeting, flipping through her agenda, already preparing her next speech about community pride. And that's when the first question dropped. A reporter stood up, recorder in hand, and asked, "Ms. Whitmore, can you explain why residents are being fined for minor porch decor, while your home has multiple unapproved renovations, none of which appear in HOA public records?" Silence. For the first time since I moved in, Karen looked unsure. I'm not aware of any," she started. Another neighbor stood up. "Really? You signed off on your own fence expansion. I've got the time-stamped approval right here." A second reporter joined in. "Multiple residents have documented discrepancies. Selective enforcement, lack of board votes. Would you like to comment on those allegations?" Karen's eyes darted around the room. Her usual support, the board members she'd always relied on, looked down at their hands, suddenly quiet. It was as if the room had shifted. For years, she had controlled this place with fear and manipulation. But now the light was on, and the shadows were retreating. And the shadows were retreating. I didn't even need to speak. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. The reporters didn't back off. They asked about the late-night surveillance, about the weaponized bylaws, about the multiple ignored appeals. Karen tried to regain control. This meeting is not for public media inquiries, but it was too late. A neighbor live-streamed the entire thing on Facebook. The comment section was already blowing up. The HOA lawyer, who had been sitting quietly in the back corner, finally stood and whispered something in Karen's ear. She froze, her face drained of color. Then she abruptly ended the meeting and walked out without another word. She didn't know it yet, but her reign was over. What followed over the next few days was a beautiful kind of chaos. The news story broke. Local outlet first, then picked up by regional media. The HOA board was flooded with emails and demands for reform. An emergency meeting was called. This time, Karen didn't show up. Instead, the board, suddenly very cooperative, announced a full investigation into past HOA enforcement. Karen was quietly removed as president. Her name vanished from the HOA site. No statement, no goodbye letter, just gone. And as for my porch swing, still there, untouched. And now, it's more than just a swing, it's a landmark, a symbol of what happens when you stand up, document the truth, and shine a light on the quiet corruption hiding behind clipboards and fine print. The fallout came fast. The news piece dropped on a quiet Tuesday morning. Headline bold and biting. HOA president under fire for abuse of power. Residents push back. Within hours, the article had been shared over 1,000 times. It spread like wildfire. First, the local Facebook groups, people posting screenshots, tagging neighbors, sharing their own horror stories. Then came the Reddit threads. Someone posted the live stream from the HOA meeting with the caption, "Karen gets exposed," literally. By noon, my inbox was full. So was the HOA's. The board tried to stay silent, but silence only fed the storm. The story hit the radio. A local podcast picked it up. A well-known regional blogger did a feature titled, "When the Porch Swing Becomes a Battlefield." It wasn't just about my swing anymore. It was about the line. How far was too far when it came to control, to power, to HOA overreach? And the answer was loud and clear. This was too far. By Wednesday, the board held a closed-door emergency session. No minutes were posted, no statements were made, but the outcome leaked anyway. Karen had been strongly encouraged to resign, which is HOA speak for. "We're throwing you under the bus before the lawyers get involved." And she did, quietly. No apology, no admission. Just a single line in the newsletter the following week. Karen Whitmore has stepped down as HOA president due to personal matters. But we all knew, and that wasn't the end of it. Thanks to the media attention and a rather motivated lawyer, the board was pressured into holding a community vote. One item on the ballot, repeal of Rule 14B, prohibited front porch fixtures. Translation, the porch swing ban. Voting opened on a Saturday morning. By Sunday night, it passed, overwhelmingly. Not only was my swing now fully permitted, but the language of the rule was revised to include protections for personal and sentimental fixtures, so long as they didn't pose structural risks. But the community wasn't done. The new board, under new leadership and suddenly very interested in transparency, launched a full audit of previous fines. The results were damning. Over 30 residents had been fined for so-called violations that didn't align with HOA code, or worse, didn't exist at all. The board issued a public statement. "We recognize past inconsistencies in enforcement and, effective immediately, are offering full refunds to any resident who received an unjustified fine within the past calendar year." Checks started arriving in the mail 2 weeks later. People were stunned, grateful, empowered. And Karen? She tried to pretend nothing had happened. She stayed inside, kept her head down, didn't attend any more meetings, didn't wave at neighbors. Then one morning, a quiet listing went up on Zillow. No for sale sign out front. Just a digital entry with sparse photos and a note. Seller highly motivated. Quick close preferred. But this neighborhood has a long memory. Real estate agents knew the story. Prospective buyers asked questions. And you know how word travels in a place like this. People remember the woman who fined a war veteran for having a flag that clashed with the seasonal color palette. People remember the woman who said a swing was a threat. And more importantly, They remember what happened after. My swing, still there, smoother than ever. I oiled the chains, added a new cushion. It's become a quiet gathering spot. Kids sit on it after school. Neighbors stop by just to chat. It's funny. It's funny. What started as a battleground ended up being a symbol of resistance, of standing up, of what happens when someone pushes too hard and finally gets pushed back. And me? I'm not the guy who wanted to fight. I never set out to be a rebel or a local legend. I just wanted to sit on my porch. But if defending something as simple and meaningful as a porch swing turns into a movement, then maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what this neighborhood needed. And if Karen ever thinks of trying something like that again, wherever she ends up, she'll remember this street. She'll remember that swing. And she'll remember that sometimes when you come for peace, you leave with war. Because you can poke a man about his trash bins, his lawn, maybe even his mailbox. But come for his memories. Come for the last thing his grandfather ever built. You better be ready, because that's when the swing starts to move. My porch swing's still up, solid as ever. Actually, I added a second one. One for me, one for anyone who needs a break from the madness of HOA politics. It's no longer just a swing, it's a landmark now. A quiet rebellion turned neighborhood tradition. People stop by, sit a while, share stories. Some call it the porch swing purge. Others just smile and say, about time. What started as one person standing up turned into something much bigger. A reminder that even the smallest battles can echo loudly when they're fought for the right reasons. As for Karen, last I heard she moved 3 towns over into another HOA-controlled community. And rumor has it, she's already clashing with her new board over a garden gnome wearing sunglasses. Some people never learn. But you know what? That sounds like a story worth telling. Want to hear how that one ends? Drop the wildest HOA rule you've ever heard in the comments. And don't miss the next tale. The HOA tried to fine me for a tree until the mayor got involved.